American cartridges versus European cartridges. Metric versus real measurement, meaning inches. Caliber. How do they compare? That's what we're going to talk about today on Gunfighter Life. Welcome to the podcast where we talk about guns, gunfighting, tactics, ballistics, the right way with Almighty God at the center, biblical, Judeo-Christian values, and real-world first-hand experience. I'm blessed to serve you as host. First and foremost, I am a Christian. It's number one in everything I do, and hopefully it comes out in the podcast as well. Also, military, law enforcement, private security contracting, competition shooter, and some other stuff, bio bullet points in the show notes. Today, we're going to talk about European cartridges versus American cartridges. This was a good idea from one of the patrons. I often put up polls to vote on content, and I'll often put on the last tab for poll, I'll put other and then comment. And somebody did. So, if you want to suggest stuff, go to Patreon. Go to the Patreon page. There should be a link in the show notes. I can't promise that I always do it, but I try and remember to make those polls free. So you don't have to sign in, put in a credit card. You can literally just go and vote or go and put in a comment. Like, hey, I would like to hear a podcast about this or that. I'm not saying I'm going to do it. But if I think it's a good idea and I have the knowledge, I would like to do it. I'm here to serve you guys. So, again, go to the Patreon link and do that. This was such a suggestion from one of the patrons. Hey, how do these compare? So let me go through some. None of these are really common in the U.S., right? We don't like European stuff here. But none of these are super common, but the more common European cartridges here in America. I'm going to go through those and talk about perhaps what they most compare to. What are some differences? When the rubber meets the road, is there really an appreciable difference in these? That is the topic du jour. So let's get into it. Let's start off with the 6.5 by 55 Swede. This cartridge is an amazing cartridge. It came out in the 1890s. We call it the 6x5 55 Swede, but it may more legitimately called the 6.5 by 55 Norwegian, or the Norwegian Swede, or the Swedewegian, whatever you want to call it, right? If you want to make up like a celebrity couple name, the Ouija Swede or something. It was used by Norway and Sweden. A Viking ancestry, much like myself. These guys were way, way ahead of their time when you realize the ballistics of this cartridge. This cartridge came out in the 1890s. I don't know if they were the first ones to come out with a 6.5 millimeter cartridge, but it was the first really, really popular and with staying power 6.5. You could still get a brand new rifle today, chambered in the 6.5 by 55 Swede, and came out in the 1890s. That is pretty remarkable. I think the first rifle that was chambered, I'm not looking this up, I'm going by memory. I'll look stuff up later. But I think the first one was a Krag Jorgensen. If you've ever handled a Krag Jorgensen, I've only ever handled ours, the 3040 Krag, but they're amazingly smooth, awesome kind of rifles, especially for their time. Way ahead of its time in both design, kind of a sweet spot in power level, penetration, sectional density, twist rate, right? They were way ahead of their time in the twist rate. We traditionally here in America twist stuff pretty slow for I don't know whatever reason, but they didn't have that problem. What is it most comparable to today? Well, everybody's favorite, famous or notorious. Some people love it, some people hate it. But the 6.5 by 55 or the 6.5 Creedmoor, right? It's the modern analog to this. Now there's some differences, but that's the most common one. But I could say the 260 Remington. Most people aren't even going to know what that is probably unless they're really gun nerds. But most people in America today know the 6.5 Creedmoor. And here's the deal. There's really, as far as you, the hunter, there really isn't any difference. Anything that you would or could take with a 6.5 by 55 Swede, you could take with a 6.5 Creedmoor. You're launching the same diameter bullet, about the same velocity, maybe. And if it's off, it's not off by so much that it's a big deal. Traditionally, a real popular load in days of yore for the 6.5 a 55 Swede would be 160 grain round nose bullet. Not the uber high BC that everybody drools over today, but it's a fantastic game bullet. Guess what? You can load that bullet in the 6.5 Creedmoor. To give credit where it's due, I'm going to move over to Wikipedia. 1894. And let's go to some loadings listed here. 100 grain at 3,200 feet per second. 120 grain at 2,800. 140 grain at 2,900. And 154 grain at 2,600. These are loads on Wikipedia. Obviously, individual loads vary. Here's something. I remember the maximum pressure was lower. It says here maximum pressure is 51,000 psi or 46,000 cup. But I think in psi, 51,000 psi is pretty low for really hot cartridges today. It was not slow or low in the 1890s. But that's on par with, it's not far behind like a 30-06. When we got to like the 1925, we moved to 65,000 psi with the 270 Winchester, and that was pretty much a ceiling until we came out with these new, the 6.8 by 51 or the 277 Fury, which bumped up to 80,000 psi here in America. But for the longest time, 65,000 psi was kind of the peak pressure. So the old school here in America, we have something called SAMI, for better or worse. It dictates, like, I guess for litigious reasons, it dictates what people load their ammo to as far as commercial loadings. So here in America, right, a lot of the over-the-counter 6.5 by 55 is going to be relegated to that 51,000 psi. So somebody doesn't grab that load and put it in an 1894 Swedish Mauser, if you could even find one, or Craig Jorgensen, right, and blow their gun up. That's kind of sad to me, but that's the deal. Even so, though, with that, you can get some pretty impressive velocities. Now, you may find, if you reload, you may find some reloading manuals that list, just like with a 4570, right? They'll have the pretty pedestrian, weak sauce loads for the 4570, like the original trapdoor loads, and then they'll have like the modern high pressure loads for 4570, and they'll have like, here's this modern loading, only load it in these rifles, or you can only load it in a Ruger number 1 or whatever. Well, you could do the same thing with this, right? If you got a Ruger number 1 in 6.5 by 55 and it had load data for it, you could load it to a much higher pressure. And with that, this has a greater case capacity with that standard, with the same pressure. It has a much higher, not much higher, it has a bit higher case capacity than the 6.5 Creedmoor. So you could potentially load it hotter. That said, most loads are about the same. Also, a major difference is that here in America, we think in standard and short actions. But this, the 6.5 by 55 Swede actually predates that. So if we talk about the Ruger number 1, for example, it's a single shot. It doesn't matter. There's no action length, period. But if we talk about here in America, most manufacturers will manufacture a standard length 30-06 270 length action, and they'll manufacture a short action, which is based on a 308. So 308, 6.5 Creedmoor, those are going to be your short action. Well, the OG Mauser rounds, this being one of our older rounds like this, European rounds, generally fall somewhere in the middle. So this is going to be in the middle. So it's not going to fit. I don't think it fits in a short action. You could probably hog something out and make it fit, but a standard short action is probably not going to work. So you have to go to a standard length action. Not a big deal, especially all the Tikka fanboys that fawn over Tikka. It's a fine rifle, but they use the same standard length for everything. So don't be a Tikka guy and then be like standard versus long action, because Tikka uses the same action as far as I'm aware for everything. So you're not giving anything up if you got this in a Tikka versus a 6.5 Creedmoor. But if you, like, let's say, and I think this is overemphasized, but if you were going with trying to decide a 6.5 Creedmoor or a 6.5 by 55, here in America, you could get it more often in a short action, and you could not do that with a 6.5 by 55 suite. Also, if you do find ammo, it's going to be a lot harder to find. Obviously, 6.5 Creedmoor here in America is super popular. It even surpassed the 308 for a time. It still may surpass 308 in ammo sales. It's phenomenally popular. I like the 6.5 Creedmoor. I don't think you should be doing long range hunting, like lobbing rounds at animals at a grand just for fun to see if you can hit it. I don't think that's ethical, just because of time of flight reasons. However, it's a great cartridge. It's a great hunting cartridge. I've done quite a bit of hunting with it, not at long range, at normal ranges, like I'm spot and stalk and still hunter, and a super light mountain rifle. 6.5 Creedmoor is a delight. That said, there's nothing that I would hunt with a 6.5 Creedmoor that I wouldn't hunt with a 6.5 by 55 Swede. Anyway, going back to, if you could find over-the-counter ammo in America by major American ammo manufacturers, it's likely going to be loaded to that weak sauce pressure. If, however, you get some European stuff, you probably aren't going to find it at your local Walmart. But if you get some European loadings, factory loadings, those can likely be loaded quite a bit hotter, or will be loaded hotter to modern pressures. And if you're shooting them in a modern rifle, like a Tikka, like a Ruger No. 1, like a modern Seiko or something like that, then there's no reason they couldn't safely be loaded to those pressures, like they do in Europe. So that's kind of an overview, right? This is not a specific thing on a specific target, but that's a general overview on those two cartridges compared. That's its most analogous comparison, right? Is going to be the 6.5 Creedmoor. 260 Remington, also not super popular nowadays, but it's right in there. Obviously, if you're into history and want to like an old historic round, the 6.5 55 beats that, because it's about over a century older. Literally 100 years older, more than 100 years older than the 6.5 Creedmoor. That said, if you're here in America, or even in Europe, I think now, it's probably the more logical choice to get the Creedmoor because it's way more popular. The American firearms market is way bigger than most countries in Europe, which means we kind of rule the market. So even Europeans are likely going to, but likely going to be able to find more rifles and more ammo available in 6.5 Creedmoor. Because we drive so much of the market in sales and ammo development. So the logical choice today would be the 6.5 Creedmoor. There's still nothing wrong if you want to get a 6.5 by 55 suite. Again, anything I would hunt or do with one, I could do with the other. Okay, so let's talk about another one, the 7x57 Mauser. Legendary, I recently did an entire episode on this. Karamojo Bell legendarily took a bunch of elephants with the 7x57. I'm not advising you do that, but he did it. He took them with other cartridges as well, but the 7x57 was one of them. I don't know if it came out before or after the 8x57 Mauser, but it was adopted first, I do believe, and adopted by a lot of countries. It saw a lot of military use. It sparked our development of the 30-06. It's a legendary cartridge. It has likely taken anything in America, on the North American continent, the South American continent, the African continent, the European continent. The 7x57 Mauser is a fantastic, mild-mannered gentleman of a cartridge. That said, you kind of run into the same issue here in that it is neither fish nor fowl as far as action lengths. It's not a short action. It's not a long action. So you're going to generally chamber it in a standard length action unless you have an original Mauser action. And there's plenty of those floating around because a lot of countries used it. It was adopted by a lot of countries. There was, for a time, quite a few sporterized Mausers brought here. So if you have one of those, it'll fit in that action length just fine if it was originally made for it. It's 7mm or .284, which is a really good sweet spot for rounds, right? We love 30 cals here in America, but the 7s, especially today with modern bullet technology, they're plenty enough for anything. You do get a little advantage in a 30 caliber, more frontal diameter, but you're really splitting hairs. The 7s are great. Here's an example of this, and you could get mad at this. And I love 30 calibers too. I likely haven't hunted and have more. Well, maybe that's not true, but I certainly have more 30 caliber rifles than any other caliber. I don't know if I've killed more stuff with 30s than any other. That's probably not true, actually. But I have a lot of 30 calibers. Where was I going with this? Oh, if we look at that modern high pressure that's come out since the 277 Fury, the SIG, to give credit where it's due, they came out with the first SAMI approved 80,000 PSI round. That was in 27 caliber, .277 or 270. Then Federal came out with their 7mm backcountry, 7mm, .284. And now we have the 6.5 Creedmoor Plus Peak. All of those new cartridges that have come out, kind of the biggest development in cartridge technology in the last 100 years, I would say, as far as pushing the envelope and giving us something relatively new, although steel cases aren't new, but you get the idea, the high pressure, different powders, faster burn rates, safely being fired. That's a big deal. Whether you want it or not or need it or not is neither here nor there. It's a big deal as far as technology goes. We hit a plateau for a long time, and now it's kind of like we're at the top of the mesa, and there's this one little bump, and the mesa got a little bit higher. That said, none of those are in 30 caliber. Why? Because with modern bullet technology, you don't need the 30 caliber. Anyway, getting back to the 7x57, 7mm is kind of a sweet spot. The 7x57 Mauser also came out or was adopted in the 1800s. Late 1800s. I'm not going to look that up again. I recently did an entire episode on the 7x57. It's a good cartridge. It's a good all-around cartridge. If you're not stupid with your ranges, which I don't think is ethical anyway, for time of flight reasons, you can't cheat math, you can't cheat time, unless you developed a way to shoot your bullet through a wormhole and then it can get the animal instantly. Animals move. I don't know if you know this, but newsflash, animals move. Generally, it's just in the course of their life during the day when we can hunt them, crepuscular. They're generally wandering around, eating and doing such. So the bullet takes time to get there. Anyway, reasonable hunting ranges, reasonable, North American, any North American animal except for large coastal brown bears and maybe interior grizzlies. Pretty much anything else, the 7x57 is a decent choice if you choose to do it and do the same things we talked about: modern loadings, modern pressures, modern actions. You can get a Ruger M77. I just saw one the other day in 7x57 Mauser. There's no reason that you couldn't load that to modern pressures. Again, stick to published load data. There should be manuals with listings for modern actions. But there's no reason you couldn't hunt anything in North America. Elk, deer, African plains game. Maybe not dangerous game, but plains game in Africa. It's a good cartridge. That said, not super popular here in America. So what do we compare it to here in America? The 7mm 08. The logical choice here in America is the 7mm 08. Even the 7mm 08 is not super popular here, but it's more popular than 7x57 Mauser. And the 308 is super popular still. And the only thing you really have to do if you reload to make 7mm 08 is run it through a die. Right? You take 308 brass, which is plentiful, often free because you can just find it at your local range on the ground. Anything the one will do, the other will do. And we also run into the same thing. You can get it in a standard short action. So any rifle chambered in a short action, you can get in 7mm 08 just fine. The common .308 length action. You could argue that, ballistically, you get a little bit of advantage for most things in a 7mm 08 over a .308. I don't want to get into that because we're supposed to be focused on European versus American cartridges. The more logical choice here in America is just hunt with the .308 versus a 7mm 08. But if we're sticking to 7s, it's still more logical in America to hunt with the 708 versus 7x57 Mauser. That said, if you're a history guy, the 7x57 Mauser has way more history. It's way older. I think the 7mm 08 came out in like the 80s. I may be wrong. It may be a different decade, but definitely the latter half of the 20th century. It's not an old cartridge by Mauser standards, right? By 1800 standards. It's still a young buck compared to the Mauser cartridge. That said, if you just want a 7x57 Mauser, there's some really cool old classic rifles, obviously Mausers and other rifles, and you can get newer rifles chambered in 7x57. Again, the Ruger. I know I've mentioned them a lot today, but they kind of have they're kind of known for making special runs of like oddball cartridges, and they've made special runs of the 7x57 Mauser. Their M77 and their Ruger No. 1. And again, if you're going to get it in a single shot, you're not really giving anything up. You can load it up just as hot in a Ruger No. 1, assuming you have modern brass, but I doubt you're picking up, I doubt you're scouring a battlefield for 1890s Mauser brass. I imagine you're buying new Starline or good quality brass. And in a single shot, strong action, falling block, whatever, you can load it up hot. Just stick to your published load data. But if you're doing that, there's really no disadvantage. Go to the wiki for some loads here. And again, loads vary wildly. Maybe Buffalo Bore makes a 7x57 Mauser. It's likely going to be hotter, right? But we have an RWS loading here for 123 grains at 2,900 feet per second. And we have a 173 grain at 2,500. That would be a good game. Assuming it's a good bullet construction, that's a good game load there. I think this is the original military loading, which is, or one of the older military loadings, which is 173 grain at 2297. Which is going to now bring us to the 8x57 Mauser. This is the one that the Germans used, and many others, but the Germans famously used it in both World Wars, both the Imperial German Army and the Nazis. They used this most notably in their Mauser 98, which is a fantastic action. It's the basis of what I consider the best bolt-action rifle ever made by humans, which is the Pre-64 Winchester Model 70. And we copied it. You get mad at that if you want, but we did. We copied it. We copied it so hard that we got sued in patent court and lost. And it was awarded to Germany because we copied them on both their cartridge and their rifle. That rifle being the Mauser, I don't know if it was the Mauser 98 or a precursor, it may have been like a 96 or something, but we copied the Mauser. The Mauser 98 is legendary. It is one of the most rugged, repeating firearms, period, ever. That said, they weren't really appreciated after the war because they lost and we won, and we had a bunch of good Mauser actions in this country, and a lot of them have been sporterized. Those Mauser actions. A lot of them came in 8x57. A lot of the ammo did not. So a lot of those were converted, sadly, like the original Mauser 98s. A lot of them were just cut up, converted, which is sad from a history standpoint. But if you want a good Mauser action here in America, you can likely find a sporterized one that's not a lot of money that if you were to build that action today would cost you an arm and a leg. You can still get a brand new Mauser 98 today. In fact, let me look that up. A new Mauser 98, the standard, is listed on their website at the time of this recording for €14,429, I think, euros. 14,000 and some. Even if the conversion rate is not exact, that's a buttload of money. You could build an entire battery or two with that amount of money. That's how good that's what the rifle costs to make nowadays. You could get a good German Mauser action in this country for next to nothing if it's been sporterized compared to that. A lot of those, again, are going to be different calibers, but if you find one in 8x57, the topic of today, talking about the European cartridges, we pretty much copied the Mauser cartridges for the 30-06. I hate to be super vanilla, but really anything that you would do with the 30-06, you could do with an 8x57 Mauser. Obviously, 30 caliber is 7.62 millimeters, 0.308 caliber. You're talking 8 millimeter or 7.92. You're really splitting hairs when you talk about, it's 8 millimeters, so it's bigger. Okay, it's a little bit bigger. It's also got a little bit shorter case. We're splitting hairs here. But if we want to stick to 8 millimeters, we in America traditionally spew 8 millimeters out of our mouth. We do not like 8 millimeters. We have tried, and we've had some good American 8mm cartridges. None that really compare to the 8x57 Mauser, but we had the 8mm Remington Magnum. A really good ballistic round. I'm not a big fan of the big Magnums because I think they're superfluous. I think they're more than you need. It's kind of like trying to hang a picture with a sledgehammer. You can do it, but you're just wasting energy. That's how I feel about big Magnums. But the 8mm Remington Magnum, if you like Magnums, is an awesome one. It failed. It flopped. It flopped so hard, we hate 8mm so bad, we converted it to a 7 in the 7 STW, and that one was way more popular. Go figure, even though we already had good 7 Magnums. But anyway, that's one 8mm in America that flopped. The other one that was also very, very good is the 325 WSM. That's probably the worst of the WSM cartridges as far as flops go. Phenomenal if you want a big Magnum. I mean, it's kind of a sweet spot. Anyway, the 325 WSM, another 8mm here in America that flopped. They're the only two that I can think of. We don't like 8mm here. That's it. There's nothing wrong with them ballistically. You're talking about 7.62 versus 7.92. You're talking about a fraction of a millimeter. Come on. So I can't really compare it to an American 8mm because we tend to hate those here in America. However, really, the 30-06. As legendary as the 30-06 is, and it's a phenomenal cartridge, I say in America it's the most flexible, best all-around hunting cartridge, period. Even with everything else that's newer, because there's so many rifles, so many loadings in it, you could say, anything that can do the 300 Win Mag can do. Yeah, it can if you want to beat yourself up for no reason. Yeah, if you're a sadist, yeah, fine, 300 Win Mag. But if you just want, sufficient power to kill anything in North America, and the 30-06 has in spades, including big coastal brown bears with the right loading, the 30-06 will do it, and it will do it without a ton of recoil. Anything the 30-06 will do, if you want to spend more money on ammo and have ammo be harder to find, the 8x57 will do. And likely has done in Europe and Africa because, the Germans colonized a bunch of Africa. So the 8x57 has likely taken everything over there. But here in America, 8x57 is not real popular. You can get factory loads for it. But as far as ballistics go, really anything you would do with a 30-06, you could do with an 8x57. Now, one of the original loadings is 147 or 150 grain for the 30-06 at 2,800. That's pretty pedestrian by today's standards. But, obviously the 30-06 came out in 1906. We have had some, powder development since then. You can easily get a factory load. I wouldn't, don't put it in one of those old Springfield 1903. Some of those had bad heat treating. You can blow your gun up. And some do, some don't on the old 1903s. And why would you do that to a 1903? And also like the M1 Garand, great rifle, but it was designed for the military ball load. Modern 30-06 for hunting is hotter than that. A modern 30-06 is going to be, you could get a 150 grain at 3,000, easy. I just say that as a benchmark when I read you some of these 8x57 loads. And obviously, the 150, 147 grain, that's like an old military standard. You can get much heavier bullets. You can get lighter bullets. Here in America, 30-06 has a ton of loadings from like 100, 110 grain up to the 220 grain, Remington Corlocks that are kind of legendary for heavy hitting. But I just say that for comparison to the 8x57. We have here listed an RWS load on Wikipedia, again, 181 grains at 2,700. Right, that's right on par with 180 grain loading in a 30-06. We have, that one's still pretty close, 198 grains RWS load at 2,600 and 139 grain RWS load at 3,000 feet per second. So, again, like, you could argue the 30-06 is better, and I think it probably is, but we developed off of one of the Mauser cartridges. But really, you're splitting hairs. If you want an 8x57 Mauser for whatever reason, or you inherit one or have one or find a good deal on one and you want to hunt with it, make sure if it's an old Mauser action, do your research to see what pressures it can handle. Or if you get a modern rifle, an 8x57 Mauser, it's a great round. Obviously, history, not just Germany, but a bunch of other countries used 8x57 Mauser. I mentioned the Mauser 98, but a lot of countries copied the Mauser 98 because it was so good. They licensed it out, and a lot of those aren't nearly as coveted. So a lot of rifles out there in 8x57. It's a great round. It's completely capable. Obviously, don't go hunting with full metal jacket bullets. Use modern game bullets, but it's a great cartridge. It's just not real popular here in the U.S. unless you're like a Milsurp aficionado. Obviously, it's way less practical here in America than the 30-06. That doesn't mean it's bad ballistically. It's totally fine. And especially for like regular North American game, it's just fine with proper bullet construction. All right, I think that's going to wrap it up. Those are the three even most popular European cartridges, I think, here in America, and even those aren't very popular. So with that said, thanks for listening. You may notice that I've been doing a lot of rifle content lately. I'll be honest about that. Part of that is because I'm working a private security contract and I have to carry a Glock for work. So in my practice time, which has been limited because I'm busy, I have been making sure to train with the Glock, which I can do, and I can do well. I've won competitions with Glock, but it kind of robs me of all my joy. Like, if I'm being honest, like shooting with a Glock, when I have such better guns and better handguns, it's kind of joy robbing. It's kind of like, I don't know, you have a Harley Davidson or a Ducati in the garage, but you have to drive a moped for work, and so therefore you train with your moped and ride your moped. Like, it's technically a motorcycle, but it's just not the same, dude. Yeah, that's the Glock with me lately. Iron sights, Glock factory trigger, like bleh. Just so I haven't been super excited about handgun stuff. I usually love handguns and love shooting handguns, but having to shoot a Glock, it just makes me want to throw up in my mouth. Anyway, I've been doing it, so I've been doing a lot more rifle content because it makes me, kind of sad when I think about the Glock. So I've been doing a lot more rifle content lately. That's why, if I'm being honest with you guys. Also, I've been spending a lot of time doing the private security contracting thing, and it's got me dreaming about hunting, being out in the woods, being out in the bush. I haven't been able to do that as much lately. So when I think about that, I think about hunting, which gets me thinking about rifle calibers. If I'm just being honest. And if I'm being honest, when I'm up for bidding on new contract stuff and the shifts and, things I'm going to bid on, part of what's going to play into that is how much money the podcast is making. And that will dictate how much effort I can put into the podcast. If you want to support the podcast, all the buzzwords, veteran, small business, American made, right? You want to support, consider going to the Patreon page and supporting. There should be a Patreon link in the show notes. If you think the content is worth $5 a month, you can give more than that, but I think that's the minimum. Not that I set, but I think that's the minimum that Patreon sets. You can sign up on Patreon. Consider supporting the podcast. With that, I'm going to have to go right into the tactical verse of the day because we're going long here. Your tactical verse of the day. Indeed, heaven and the highest heavens belong to the Lord, your God, also the earth with all that is in it. That's a simple verse, but think about all the things that God has made. Think about, we talked about hunting. the birds of the air and the beasts of the field and all the wonderful creatures that we have on this earth that are beautiful, that are amazing, the way that they work, the way they interact with each other. You think that's all just random chance by stupid stardust bumping into stardust? No, God made this beautiful creation, and he made you to have dominion over it. That's a great and wonderful thing. Remember that. Hopefully you can remember that when you're in the city, in the people hive, but especially remember that when you're actually blessed enough to be out in the bush, in the mountains, in God's beautiful creation. With that, thanks for listening, and have a blessed day.